Good evening and welcome to Café Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for the beautiful classical guitar music. It was so relaxing. And to Henry Crawford for the lovely slideshow. And thank you to the WordWorks for sponsoring our program. I'm Claire McGough, and I'm hosting tonight along with Majda Gama. We are grateful this evening for our tech director, Henry Crawford, working his magic behind the scenes, and we're very grateful for you, our audience. Our featured poets tonight are Melanie McCabe and Cindy Savett. I will be introducing Melanie, and Majda will be introducing Cindy. We encourage you to buy our featured authors' books and to donate to Café Muse to support our literary programs. You'll be able to see links for both of these in the chat. Audience members have been muted. This helps to prevent feedback problems and ensures uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do have a technical glitch. During the reading, you may use the chat to comment or to ask questions that our readers may answer during the Q&A period, moderated by our very own Karen Alanier, if time permits. Our program is scheduled for 1 hour. You won't want to miss our next Café Muse reading, which will take place on Monday, April 3rd at 7:15. And will feature from the Belly Readers, poets responding to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons. It will be live at the Writer's Center and also live on Zoom. And now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our first reader, Melanie McCabe. Melanie is from Virginia and taught high school English in Arlington for 22 years. She's a writer not only of poetry, but of essay, memoir, and fiction. In fact, Melanie's 2017 memoir, His Other Life, Searching for My Father, His First Wife, and Tennessee Williams, won the University of New Orleans Press Lab Prize. But this evening, we'll hear from Melanie, the poet. Melanie's work has appeared in Poetry Daily, the Best New Poets of 2010, the Massachusetts Review, Threepenny Review, Southern Poetry Review, and numerous others. Melanie's first collection, History of the Body, was published in 2012. Her second collection, What the Neighbors Know, 2014, was awarded honorable mention in the Library of Virginia's Literary Awards competition. The Night Divers, Melanie's most recent collection, published in 2022 by Terrapin Books, is dedicated to her sister, Carrie. It is a tribute to, a reflection on, and an exploration of life and loss. As one reader put it, these elegiac poems turn over the tender and fraught intimacy of two sisters, one gone and one left to tell their story. Melanie's poems are beautifully accomplished. When reading Melanie's work, I feel I'm being guided through each line with a confident and deft hand, and one that seems to get that vulnerability as a strength. I'm struck by Melanie's skillful use of image as metaphor throughout her poems. Her use of figurative language is truly masterful. Mary Oliver once said the poet must not only write the poem, but must scrutinize the world of her subject intensely. It's clear that Melanie has done just that with whatever she puts on the page. In Melanie's most recent collection, The Night Divers, images of water surface and resurface as if echoing the ocean. We see and feel this in the shaking green light of a hotel pool, and in the ocean as a gray tale told over and over until it did the work of prayer. Images of birds also appear and reappear, as if taking off and landing the same but different, showing up like crows that blow wrong as umbrellas. And I love this passage. I call it gull, but it could be any winged thing. It is not there as bird, after all, but as emissary. Many of the images in Melanie's poems are like emissaries. informing the poem itself, informing the reader, and giving shape to the difficult, the painful, and persistent. I'm honored to present to you Melanie McCabe.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely introduction. I appreciate that. I'm going to be reading from The Night Divers. This is my book. And I'm also going to read a couple poems from earlier books as well. The one I'm beginning with is the opening poem of the book, and it's called If Time Travel is Possible. Physicists concur that if time travel is possible, it will be only in one direction, into a future filled with people I do not know, towns so rearranged and remade that I would need a guide to walk the landscape I once claimed as mine, the streets that I could tick off and tally like beads in a well-ordered prayer. Something about traveling backwards would confound the past, introduce now into then, and the orderly progression of what happened and what happened next. I'm no scientist, but I've watched Back to the Future, and so I know the risk of my own disappearance, the wrong strings I might pull that could tangle the marionettes of my history. But Marty McFly's mistake was opening his mouth, being seen. That is why my own plan is foolproof. I do not want to return as an actor to the scene, but as a viewer, a voyeur, a peeping me at the window of my childhood, able to follow my younger self as I move through the house, to peer into other windows and listen in on conversations my parents had while I was sleeping. It would be enough to watch, and then to watch once more the reels of those days spin out, the effect like the lull and comfort of an old movie returned to again and again, because it soothes, because of the calm that comes from knowing before it even begins that the end is only the end until you start over. This poem, I picked poems tonight to read that I haven't read in other readings, so I might be a little rusty on them. This is called What Burned in the Sky, and it talks about a memory of my sister and me from when we were teenagers. Every afternoon that spring, my sister and I hurried home to catch the narrow 90-minute sliver of sun that fell across our driveway, scraping the aluminum of the latticed lounge chairs across the bricks to find the perfect angle to tip our faces, our winter white bodies, to the sinking light. Speed was valued, as was teamwork. In early May, we began with copper tone, our fingers quick over the easily accessible calves and thighs, bellies and arms, and then attending to one another over the harder to reach places, and finally the impossible circles between the shoulder blades. By June, we had bronzed enough to transition to baby oil, and sometimes for the heady scent of it, cocoa butter. It was the spring that Deep Purple climbed the charts. And though our tiny radio with the bent antenna picked up dozens of other tunes, Smoke on the Water is the only one that I recall, the only song that plays in my head when I try to resurrect those yellow hours. That 4-measure riff repeats in tandem with the remembered drone of planes, the nearer hum of bees through moss and violets. 40 years later, knowing everything that came afterwards, it seems the only soundtrack that makes any sense at all. Our time was running out. But the 5 o'clock church bells were the deadline we honored then, and as they told, our sun was doused behind the oak as the driveway surrendered to shadows. It was the hour to go inside. We were certain there would be more afternoons, we circled with the earth to hurry them. This poem is called Your Vanity, and I liked the title of that because obviously it can work two ways. It's about a piece of furniture, but it's about more than that. I found the Polaroid at the bottom of a box while I was searching for photos to mount and display at your funeral. Light and heat and carelessness had not been kind. The image was jigsawed through with cracks that made it seem less a ruin and more some damaged portrait from a Renaissance attic. Your face divided by branching roots, your expression a fragment of a moment that seemed so ancient I couldn't absorb that it was I who had preserved it. Behind you was your vanity that backed against the west wall of the bedroom we shared, its glass top covered in the implements of your beautifying. Holding a magnifying glass over the image, the history of 17-year-old you rose up for me like a ghost. And so I inventoried the artifacts to keep you from disappearing. 16 bottles of nail enamel, pearl of nutty nutmeg, marked with a line after each application so that I would not pilfer even a little. An Econo jar of dippity-doo for the wings that would not, the flyaways that would, a yellow pump bottle of Sun-In, a curling iron, an empty Marlboro hard pack, a lighter, and a gift of Jovan Woman I gave you at Christmas, full-bodied and still uncorked. A mirror with a dial to 4 possible locales, always set on evening light for a pink and poreless glow. 6 eyelash curlers with the rubber missing and a tube of waterproof Maybelline for the eyelashes that survived. Neither of us had any faith in our own allure, though we labored at it, stone cutters in a quarry that only grew deeper and emptier, painters with a palette of infinite color and only one canvas. I kept the photo, but did not add it to the display. Who but me would see beyond its damage, its brittle flaking, to the magic that appeared in my hand that day in 1978. We snapped dozens, hovered over each as they materialized before us, but this is the one that survives. You must not have been ready for me to snap the picture, because your smile is more laughter than smile, your eyes not coy, but merry. I kept the photo for myself alone, evidence, though it was disintegrating, of who you were when no one was watching. I'm going to read 2 poems from this book, which is What the Name was my second book of poems. And I chose 2 that are especially important to me. The first one is called The Air Then. And this came from a conversation I had with my daughter, Taryn. We were talking about the past and she said, you know, Mom, it just feels like even the air back then was different. And I said, it was. So this is where that poem came from. The air then was more amber and there was hickory in it. Wild bees lived in the ground and swarmed, and our feet were often in the branches, our faces in the green and yellow dappling that flickered as the wind blew through. We pushed baby buggies and bicycles over grass so long, it lay flat in the wet heat. We watched boys hop and fall from a black that came, we knew where it was going. The air was full of mothers and charcoal burning and bells. Pianos played from the open windows and insect wings beat in our hair. Shade was a dream that smelled of moss and stones. On asphalt, crisscrossed with rolling balls, tar bubbles rose and fell. Green apples dropped to the front lawn and tanged the afternoon. At dusk, the dark welled with lightning and roses. Voices moved without bodies in the shadows. Laughter warbled through the spinning blades of fans. The air was too heavy to leave the night that held it. Our lungs filled again and again, and each time we let it go. This other poem that I'm going to read from this book is called The Naked Days. It's also like a favorite of mine. My daughters, had two daughters. When they were younger, there was a period of our lives together that they used to refer to as the naked days. And that's what inspired this poem. The house then was a clearing of white light, bordered by a forest no one knew how to move through but the three of us. This was after and before there were men. This was the lull we called alone. Now, when I want to conjure that time, I try wind, wood smoke, wet earth, wolves. My daughters moved on all fours, hair scented with fallen oak leaves and torn branches. Nothing was quiet except the world outside us. We opened our mouths and could breathe the moon. This was after and before. Now the older tells the younger, remember the naked days. Those days when they wore their bodies unfathered, unbrothered, when they lived in their skin with their fast hearts, their lengthening bones. Then I lived with no one in my bed, the wide sheets as undisturbed as a sea I did not have to cross. When I rose, I was their mother, their other. We were three and all. We named ourselves with more than one name and balanced each on our tongues, gave them as offerings to the forgiving air. For a time that didn't last, we let ourselves answer to all of them. I think I'm just gonna, thank you. I'm just gonna read one poem from History of the Body and then one more poem from The Night Divers, and I think that will use up my time. This poem is called Beneath the Code, and what it references is the Hays Code, which was a code that was imposed on early Hollywood and TV shows that was supposed to restrict, things that were inappropriate. Beneath the code. Somehow we respond, despite the twin bed love of Lucy and Ricky, of Laura and Rob, despite that one chaste foot planted at all times on the floor. Somehow desire popped the cork from the bottle, even though Jeannie never flashed a peep of navel. Even though the castaways lived for years bound inside their tight little hammocks. Our mothers were startled by tongues after girlhood spent watching kisses timed with stopwatches, by a code that decreed that lips be kept closed and dry. What happened after kissing was always metaphor. Waves pounded, fireworks boomed. After Stella came down the stairs to run her fingers over Stanley's wet skin to be carried through the portieres, a hydrant gushed across a steamy street. After Carrie pulled Eva from death on Mount Rushmore and into an upper berth, we cut to the train as it entered and was swallowed by tunnel. Our mothers' bodies waited for high tide, for pyrotechnics. They waited through fumbling hands and husbands. They waited while we were born, began to wait beside them. Whatever a fallen woman had done to fall was never shown, lest we like that well, lest we lick our lips and make a fast to-do list of sins. Though we dreamed hard edges into the soft focus lens, a way to drag our heat, slow the quick dissolve, we knew the penance for those dreams was to move across silk and gossamer like a broken nail. From restraint, we learned still more restraint, to be proud of surviving on such tiny portions. Though each of us was born into our bodies, we took up only a part of them. And I think I'm going to end with the title poem of the Night Divers, and that'll do it for me. This is another memory of my sister and me from when we were quite young. Each night, we dropped quarters for each other into the shaking green light of the hotel pool, testing our mettle and our lungs in the still, scary plunge into the deep end. Less than an hour from closing, we were often the only swimmers in this abandoned world. All other children out on the teeming boardwalk, appended to a parent's hand, or already bathed, pajamaed, lulled in the laugh track of a sitcom, struggling to stay awake through a flickering blue hypnosis. My sister and I were proud rebels in our contrary allegiance to this chlorine-scented center of the earth, ringed by balconies draped in bright beach towels, forsaken by those who chose to confine their holidays to sunlight and hubbub. If far off, we could hear the bells and cries of Funland, or the shrieks of teenagers chasing the selves they were becoming faster than that ruckus could be swallowed and by one dive into the water where bubbles and our heartbeats were the only sounds that lasted. I have no memory of being watched, though I suppose we were. What has stayed with me all these years later is only our two bodies, pushing, kicking again and again toward a bottom that was lit and well marked, and then the quick pivot, the surge for air that we never doubted would be awaiting us when we returned for it. That's it for me. Thank you for listening. I appreciate that.
Oh my gosh, Melanie, thank you so much for these beautiful poems and for letting us sort of walk in this world with you and your sister. That it was so sensory for me, especially the sun in and the dippity-doo. I mean, there was more going on than that, but just phenomenal poems. Appreciate them. Thank you. Well, it is my pleasure tonight to introduce our second poet of the evening, Cindy Savett, who is reading for us from her latest book, The Breath. The Breath is a book of incantation and summoning, at heart a dialogue between a mother and a departed daughter that becomes an entire taut universe. Language is sharply honed and precise. Lines move across the page like stark black branches, and every poem unfolds beautifully into the next. Poems reside in the oral world of the mouth through the use of rich imagery. Winter is a tongue, howls are earthen hulls, yet silence is also there. Physical presence in the book, an observer, a just exhaled breath. In an interview with Burning House Press, Cindy is asked, "Why poetry?" And she responds, "Poetry finds a way for me to belong. We are part of each other, the poem and me. We disturb the air." This is the essence, to me, of her book, The Breath. It disturbs the air. Cindy Savett is the author of Child in the Road from Parlor Press, The Breath, Blaze Vox Books, and the chapbooks The Story of My Eyes, Battle for the Metal Kiss, Rachel in the Temporary Mist of Prayer, and Overtures of Survival. Her work is also found in the anthology Challenges for the Delusional. The sudden death of her youngest daughter generated a fierce reckoning in her poems. Much of her writing since is focused on grief. She lives with her family on the outskirts of Philadelphia, where she leads poetry workshops for psychiatric inpatients at several area hospitals. Please welcome Cindy Savett to Café Muse.
Majda, thank you for that lovely introduction. I feel like I learned a little about myself. Thank you. So thank you so much to everybody at Café Muse, to Henry and Maja, to Claire and to Karen. Thank you so much for hosting us. And it was a pleasure, Melanie, to listen to you. And I feel a little honored to be reading with you. Thank you. So yes, Maja did introduce my work at the Breath, but I am going to start off with in a little bit of a different direction before I move over to the Breath. My former teacher and good friend, Jean Valentine, passed away a couple of years ago from Alzheimer's. And I want to read a poem of hers and then a poem I wrote in response to her death. Jean and I met out in Provincetown shortly after 9/11 and began to work together for a couple of years, one-on-one. We turned into good friends, and I used to travel to New York to see her once a month. And we had tea in her apartment while our cats hid under the blankets on the couch. And I miss her, and it was a wonderful relationship. So I'd like to read a poem from her collection, Door in the Mountain, that won the National Book Award. The Pen. The sandy road, the bright green 2-inch lizard, little light on the road. The pen that writes by itself, the mist that blows by through itself. The gourd I drink from in my sleep, that also drinks from me. Who taught me to know instead of not to know? And this pen, its thought, lying on the thought of the table, a bow lying across the strings, not moving, held. So I did write a couple of poems in response to Jean's death, and I want to read just one of them, titled Jean. Forest risen in your kitchen, who's close to me? Pine flesh, tea on my breath, tea on your breath. I bent to your table. You have Bells in Winter by Milosz. Do I know him? Am I supposed to know him? Think, there must be muscular grace where you are insistently singing your name, what you gave, still. Yes, falling after the breath beyond what I know. So now I will turn to the book, The Breath. I wrote this, as Majda said, in response, as a circling around of my daughter's death, more than a response. My first book was really The Scream, and this book is more an effort to grow with her death, grow in her death and through it and with it. It features my husband, Rob, in this, and some of my two other children from time to time. Incantation number 1. Play child, girl child, sky daughter, you, bird child, as a feathered shine, sparrow, gold, petal girl, golden, dirt girl, my dark, oozing twin and daughter, my captain, orphan R. Here brief Rachel and bloodless Rachel and bolder Rachel. Used to be girl, thorny air, wicked daughter, propped up ally, my watchman. Leaving. I hear you rumble in the softness of my fraying mouth, your barbed tongue, and fragments of my face unspool. I scrub your words from inside my cheeks, my tangled dream slips away. I wrest you from my body and its heavy remembrances, my skin that blisters, your fire fingers that scorch the nursery corners. In your blaze, my child, I am long away from you. Ever so slightly. Today, I caught Rob's hand on stone, forcing memory, alone with fistfuls of night in tow. Downwind, our daughter leaped through the frantic hush. Rob, keeper, who sets my compass by our caresses, feverish from our dance, curls around the flame, my breath on his blistered skin. Incantation number 3. Rachel wants to touch me, lie down, rise high, wants to clutch, to yearn, to leap. She splits, singes, stumbles, sows my cravings, murmurs, seeps into, then shelters from, listens to herself, swaddles herself, sculpts herself, twists herself, surrenders and digs herself up. Mother listens, Rachel says, I ask you, dear lone figure living in perforated debris, what does our morn's dirt sound of? Its patches thrown across our lamp's raw glow? Watch me soar, then stumble, mother, over shuttered suns, mother, on the hearth. I dig, hand under hand, beneath lost blossoms, shelters inscribed with my eyes. My child gasp, longs for you, pale tinted mother. May I sleep beneath your downward tongue? Mother, hiding among the roots, you enfold yourself, grow small. We rise to mercy's debris. Rachel, will you go once we talk? Your fingers touch my closing eyes, strip kissing sinew from your bone. Let me be now that you are canceled. Though your body's stain still spreads, fills the hush left behind. I breathe to nail shut your shade, how you rely on the unbarred door. I tightly tie our wet knot, promise you to darkness so I may remain. Years in my marrow soon turn to mountain gray. Mother says, Rachel ascending. My spun gray hovers in the hours. Still we spar, thrash, and I unravel on the hard ground of your ascent. My tangled muscles bound in the hurried field fail to root among the bent over stalks. Rush towards me, my snake arms. You crave the dark smoke of my hooded eyes, you and me locked in my clay moment. Arising, I am heavy with quivers of ruin and fear for my unsteady breath. If my cunning winds quarrels with your feathered climb should miss. And this poem I'm going to read is the last poem in the book. It's titled His Sparrow. And you, the father with moist eyes, cling onto her dresses of undulant mist. Ferry her to the hunter who dreams her dreams, silences her lung, who pulls tufts of loneliness out of your hair. You build her frame with tiny bones, draw me from the marrow. O you, my pilgrim, my vein, come lie with me beneath sorrowful skies, whose starry fingers ready for our night's reaping. Rachel hides among our wild grass. Her fingers break on my tongue. We fall towards stillness. I catch you. She flies. So I'm going to switch gears for a minute and turn to new work that I have been writing. It's still a little fresh. It's my exploration of my relationship with the other, whatever the other is. And I'd like to actually start off with a poem by Harry Martinson, who won the Nobel, Swedish poet, who won the Nobel Prize in 1974. And this poem is titled Creation Night. We met on the stone bridge. The birches stood watch for us. The river gleaming like an eel around the sea. We twisted together in order to create God. There was a rustling in the grain, and a wave shot out of the rye. So here are these new poems. This other that I am exploring, I've named Blue. Seems to have named itself Blue, I should say. And blue is a pretty wide name. It has certainly a lot of meaning and color. It has resonance in literature with the blue flower. It has been expressed in painting through the Blue Rider movement in pre-World War I. Certainly has a life in music. And my interest in Martin Buber's work has begun to influence this as well. So read a couple of these poems. I hammer nails into the sand to anchor this deeply hued sea. Dip a flat brush in salt water, paint circles to dampen my hair, work waves with my hands in and out. Blue, my hair. You enter the sea, my body elevates. "6 a.m., still dark. Whose traveled soul rebounds blindly when I awake? Blue. Which of us now owns this body, this soiled hour? Blue. Thrum, thrum, fire drum in the fleshy brush, glory blue, flash bright, bid my bursting body peace, peel heavy off my breath, plow my seeded field, flush sparrow from the nest, from the flash in my eyes and the swoop to the field and the swivel side to side, sow me to your soil, free fall. plummet down. This poem begins with a quote of Martin Buber. All actual life is encounter. I scrape my hand on a sliver of bare, empty you ask me to fill. Steep rock face, my heels twist, prints dangle, beginning in the scree. Where we join is quietly codified within our tendons. Moment passes, the climb passed through. I am face up on the gray peak. Oh, blue, no less, no less. Blue speaks. Before dusk smears the pain. Let me swaddle you, chrysalis to swallowtail, the light breaching through the window. And I'll close with this final poem. Anila Dodi Vidodi Li. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. Blue, this is an ash song. Dawn's duets charred in furrows of peace. Each hour, spurn the lie, the strike, the matchsticks dare to burn the rise and rise and rise. The void can be great dark, but the leap, Cindy, of strained breath, it races through the lungs. Its lesions curl the womb, its afterlight casts about the soul, still a plate of heavens and plains. Ride on. Thank you.
Cindy, thank you so much. If I was going to ask a question, I was wondering what you'd be working on next in this exploration of the color blue. I can't wait to see what this actually looks like on the page, because I'm really admiring the way that you construct your poems. Okay, well, what a beautiful evening it's been. This is our time now for a Q&A, and Karen Elenier will conduct a brief Q&A with our poets.
Well, I'd like to say that it's often challenging to find one question to ask two very different readers. And we've had, I think, very different approaches to writing tonight. But I thought I would ask this, and that is, and we can start with Cindy Savett first. If there was one thing that you would like your audience to go away with tonight, what would that be? And is this something that you think about when you're putting your reading together? Maybe you don't, maybe you do, but if you do, is it always the same goal, or is it different? So that's my question, more or less.
Good, hard question. Thank you. What I hope for the reader to go away with is a connection to the breadth, not a pun, but the breadth, BREADTH, of life, of death, of the integral nature of how life and death work together, and how an exploration of our place in all of that is. I guess I'd like the reader to go away with an opening, perhaps. I hope that perhaps I've opened a window, maybe a door, so that the reader can walk through and gasp a little bit at the world out there, the dark and the light, and be able to grow and be enriched.
I think that's a very good and interesting response to that question, because I found your poems to be almost cone-like. They were very compressed, and they did leave you with the feeling that you had to work to open something up. And so I think that's a really interesting response. Thank you. And how about you, Melanie? What do you hope for when you're, giving your reading?
Doing readings, of course, is extremely different than having someone read your poems on the page. And when I put together a reading, there's some poems that I love and I think they're good poems, but I don't necessarily think they work well in a reading. They don't get conveyed the way I'd like them to. So I usually try to find poems that I can sell. I mean, that I can put out there in a way that people will find something that moves them or means something to them, and that they can follow in a narrative way almost. I don't want people to zone out and and not listen. And so, having been a teacher all those years, I know very well that there's a lot of people who aren't really paying attention. So I try very hard to put together a set of poems that might make people pay attention.
Yeah, yes, I think, and it's a very different challenge from your point of view versus Cindy's point of view. That I think that sometimes poetry puts you in a zone, and it seems almost like you're not listening, even though you're hearing amazing things. And I don't know if anybody was noticing, but I mean, I was quoting Melanie quite frequently because I thought the language was so interesting. And it wasn't that way with Cindy. I didn't quote Cindy like I quoted Melanie because I was moved into a zone. I was in a different place. So I think that poetry can do different things. And I think that we were treated to that kind of reading tonight. And let me see. I don't think we had any other questions in the chat tonight. So I think what I'm going to do is turn it back to Majda and let her close for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. It's always nice to end the night with the Q&A and to hear from the poets themselves. Yeah, if you look at Cindy Savett's poems on the page, they are so compressed. You're right. It's a little hard to sort of, if you just find one image and want to quote it, the whole poem kind of, you lose the center. The center does not hold. Oh, let me misquote Yeats there. Okay. Well, let me thank poets, Melanie McCabe, Cindy Savett, Michael for the classical guitar, Henry for his technical wizardry, and probably the photographs as well. Thank you to the WordWorks for sponsoring Café Muse. And thank you to my co-hosts, to Claire McGough, of course, also to Ellen Cole, Henry Crawford, also a co-host, not just a tech wizard, Renee Garrity, Luther, and Luther Jet. Thank you to our audience for being here every month. We love you. If you want to watch tonight's program again, it'll be up on Café Muse's YouTube channel tomorrow. And don't forget to buy the poets' books. That's why we're all here, because we love reading poets' books. Please join us Monday, April 3rd, 7:15 p.m. to celebrate the anthology From the Belly, Poets Respond to Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, edited by Karen Alanier. This is going to be wonderful. It's going to be a hybrid event, so you can watch it from your living room or come out and join us at the Writers Center. Hope to see you next month. Have a beautiful evening. Take care, everybody. Bye.